I sold my home to fund my husband's cancer treatment. After he recovered, he left me for a younger woman. My son and my business partners laughed at me. I spent a freezing night in a storm when I spotted a frightened little girl shivering from the cold. I spent my final $10 to get her food and a blanket. 3 days later, 17 black cars pulled up in front of the shelter as a billionaire stepped out of the car and saw his daughter with me. Can you imagine losing absolutely everything? Your home, your business, your entire life savings, not to some natural disaster, but to the person you loved most in the world? And then, at 65, when you think it simply can't get any worse, you find yourself sleeping in a homeless shelter. What would you do when the man who destroyed your life comes crawling back, begging for another chance? My name is Gretchen, and at 65 years old I learned firsthand that love, true love, can sometimes be the most devastatingly expensive mistake you'll ever make. It all started on a crisp Tuesday morning in March. I was lost in my happy place, arranging fresh flowers in my antique shop, a place I'd built from nothing, brick by brick, over 30 years. Then my phone rang. It was Dr. Martinez, and his words, they changed everything. Mrs. Gretchen, I need you and your husband to come in immediately. The test results are back. My hands literally trembled, dropping the delicate white roses I'd been holding. Damon had been so tired lately, complaining about fatigue for months, but we just brushed it off. He was 68, after all. Men his age were supposed to slow down, right? But it wasn't age. It was pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. I watched Damon, my husband of 42 years, crumble right there in that cold, sterile office. His weathered hands covered his face as Dr. Martinez talked, explaining treatment options. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. The words just blurred into a horrifying mess. But one phrase? That one cut through everything else, sharp and clear. $250,000 for the full treatment protocol. That night, Damon couldn't sleep. I found him at 3 a.m. in our kitchen, staring out at our little backyard garden. I can't put you through this, he whispered, his back to me. Maybe it's my time, Gretchen. Maybe I should just. My heart ached. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, feeling how much weight he'd already lost. Don't you dare talk like that, I told him, my voice fierce. We are going to fight this. Together. Our insurance, generous as it was, would only cover about 60%. The rest? That $100,000 had to come from somewhere. I knew where. My antique shop. My life's work. Started in '82 with $300 and a dream. 18-hour days, pouring my soul into every piece, every display. It sat on prime real estate, worth nearly $400,000. And our house? Paid off, another $200,000. Between them, we'd have enough for Damon's treatment, and even a small apartment, while he recovered. I made the decision. Without telling him. The next morning, I called a realtor. Are you sure about this, Mrs. Patterson? Janet, my realtor, asked, her voice laced with concern. These are major assets. Once you sell, there's no going back. I looked at Damon, sleeping fitfully on the couch, gaunt and pale. I'm sure, I said, my voice unwavering. It took 6 agonizing weeks. 6 weeks of watching Damon grow weaker, his spirit dimming, while I quietly, methodically, dismantled our life. I sold the shop to a developer who planned to tear it down for condos. My heart broke a little more with each signed paper. Our beautiful Victorian house went to a young couple with 3 children. They promised to care for my rose garden, and that was a small comfort. We moved into a small apartment across town, and I threw myself into being Damon's sole caregiver. Every morning, I drove him to treatments. Every evening, I held his head while he was sick, my heart heavy with his pain. I learned to cook bland foods, give injections, monitor his medication with military precision. For 8 long months, cancer was our entire world. But it worked. In November, Dr. Martinez used the word we'd been praying for. Remission. Damon looked better than he had in a year. His color returned, his appetite came roaring back. He started talking about the future again. I really thought we had won. I was so incredibly naive. The conversation that shattered my entire world happened on a cold Wednesday evening in December. I was humming, stirring Damon's favorite soup, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Then he cleared his throat behind me. "Gretchen, we need to talk." Something in his tone sent a cold dread straight to my stomach, but I kept stirring, trying to pretend. "What about?" I asked, my voice a little too casual. "I've been thinking a lot during this whole ordeal, about life, about what I want." I slowly turned, soup spoon still in my hand. Damon was sitting at our small kitchen table, hands folded, looking anywhere but at me. I want a divorce." The spoon clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. "What?" My voice was barely a whisper. "I know this is difficult," he continued, his gaze still averted, "but I've realized that I want to spend whatever time I have left being truly happy." "Happy?" I choked out, my voice sounding foreign, distant. "Haven't we been happy? After beating cancer together." He finally looked at me then, and I saw something I'd never, ever seen in his eyes before: complete, utter indifference. "Gretchen, you're a good woman, but we've been living like roommates for years. I want passion. I want to feel alive again." "Feel alive again?" I repeated, disbelief and a slow burning rage starting to build. "I sold everything to save your life. I spent 8 months taking care of you. I gave up my business, my home, everything I built." His response? A cold, brutal blow. "I never asked you to do that." I grabbed the counter, my knuckles white, trying to steady myself against the sudden vertigo. "You never asked me? You're my husband." "Of course I did it." "Well," he said, standing up, his voice chillingly final, "now I'm asking for my freedom." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a sudden realization, some cancer-induced epiphany. This was planned. Calculated. "There's someone else, isn't there?" I asked, the words heavy with dread. His silence was all the answer I needed. "Who is she?" I demanded. "Her name is Sarah. She was one of my nurses during treatment." It felt like falling down a bottomless well. Sarah. I remembered her. Pretty, blonde, maybe 32 or 33. She'd always been extra attentive to Damon, always smiling, laughing at his jokes. I just thought she was being professional. How naive I was. "How long?" I whispered, my voice raw. "Does it matter?" He sighed, clearly irritated. "How long, Damon?" "Since July," he finally admitted. July. Right in the middle of his treatment. While I was selling my entire life's work to pay for his care, he was falling in love with another woman. "I want you out by the end of the month," he said, standing tall now, looking almost proud. "I'll give you 30 days to find somewhere else to live. This is my apartment, too. I'm the one who rented it. My name is on the lease. Sarah will be moving in after the holidays. It would be awkward for all of us if you stayed." I just stared at him. This man I'd loved for 42 years. This man I'd sacrificed everything to save. I didn't recognize him. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I don't have any money. I spent everything on your treatment." He shrugged, utterly devoid of empathy. "That's not my problem anymore, Gretchen." Just like that. 42 years. Gone. The next week was a blur of utter nightmare. I called our son, Robert, my boy, thinking, surely he'll be outraged. Surely he'll understand. His response? "Mom, I think you need to accept that Dad has the right to be happy. You two haven't been in love for years." Everyone could see that. My jaw dropped. "Robert, I gave up everything to save his life," I cried. "That was your choice," he shot back. "But you can't hold that over his head forever." "Hold it over his head?" "I'm not holding anything over his head. I'm just trying to understand how you can support this." Robert sighed, sounding so completely exasperated. "Look, Mom. You've always been dramatic. Dad told me how you've been guilt-tripping him about the money. Sarah makes him happy in a way you haven't for years. He told him about Sarah? Of course he did, Mom. He's been miserable. Give him a break. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking, feeling more profoundly alone than I ever had in my entire life. My own son. My flesh and blood. Taking his father's side, painting me as the villain in this story. But the absolute worst was yet to come. I'd held on to a glimmer of hope, my partnership in Patterson and Associates, a consulting business I'd built with 2 other women before the shop. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small income to figure things out. 2 days after New Year's, Margaret and Susan called me into the office. Gretchen, we've been discussing your situation, Margaret began, her eyes skittering away from mine. Given everything you're going through personally, we think it might be best if you stepped back from the business. Step back? I repeated, my voice hollow. I helped found this company. Susan leaned forward, her expression a mask of fake sympathy. We're concerned about your emotional state. The divorce, the financial stress. It's affecting your judgment. Affecting my judgment? What are you talking about? I've been working here for 20 years. Margaret chimed in. You missed 3 client meetings last month. You seemed distracted, unfocused. I was dealing with my husband's cancer treatment, and then a divorce. I practically screamed. Of course I was distracted. Exactly our point, Susan said, her voice chilling. We think you need time to get your personal life sorted out. We're prepared to buy out your partnership stake. They offered me $15,000. For a partnership worth at least $40,000. I knew they were taking advantage of me, utterly and completely, but I was so broken, so exhausted. I didn't have the energy. Or the resources? To fight them. By February 1st, a mere 2 months after Damon's cold decree, I had lost my husband, my son's respect, my home, my business, and my life savings. I was 65 years old, with nowhere to go and absolutely no one to turn to. The homeless shelter on Maple Street became my temporary address. The social worker was kind, but weary. It's just until you get back on your feet, she assured me, handing me a list of rules and meal times. Most people don't stay long. But as I lay in my narrow cot that first night, listening to the sounds of 30 other women trying to sleep in one cramped room, I wondered. Was this it? Was this how my story would end? Alone. Forgotten. Discarded by the very people I'd sacrificed everything for? The woman next to me snored softly. Across the room, someone cried quietly into their pillow. Outside, rain began to fall. I pulled my thin blanket up to my chin. I tried not to think about Damon and Sarah in the apartment I'd paid for, sleeping in the bed I'd bought, building a life on the ashes of mine. Tomorrow would mark exactly 2 months since he asked for a divorce. 2 months since my entire world had collapsed. 3 incredible days passed in a blur of careful survival and growing attachment. Charlotte and I had built our own little routine, mornings at Danny's convenience store, afternoons in the park, and nights back at the gazebo or sometimes the 24-hour laundromat when it was too cold. I was amazed by Charlotte's resilience. Despite everything, she was mostly sunny, telling me stories that painted a picture of a life so privileged, I could barely imagine it. A house with 12 bedrooms, a butterfly-shaped swimming pool, horses. Daddy travels a lot for work, she explained as we shared crackers. Sometimes I don't see him for weeks, but when he comes home, we have tea parties. What kind of work does your daddy do? I asked. He makes things happen, she said, her small voice serious. Important things. That's why the bad men wanted to take me, to make him do what they wanted. The more she talked, the more convinced I became that her father was someone significant. Wealthy enough to be a kidnapping target. Important enough that professional criminals would risk taking his child. But if that was true, where was the news coverage? The search parties? The FBI? Living in the shelter, I had no access to any of it. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, as we sat in the park watching pigeons fight over the breadcrumbs I'd bought with my dwindling funds, Charlotte suddenly grabbed my arm. Gretchen, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. That car, It's been there before. I followed her gaze to a black sedan parked across the street. Windows tinted too dark to see inside. It had been there for at least 20 minutes. Are you sure? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Charlotte nodded, pressing closer. Yesterday, near the store. And the day before, near the gazebo. My heart rate spiked. If someone was watching us, if the kidnappers had found Charlotte again, we were in serious danger. A 65-year-old homeless woman and a small child were no match for professional criminals. We're going to walk away very calmly, I told her quietly. Just like we're going somewhere normal. Don't look back at the car. We gathered our few belongings and started walking deeper into the park, towards the tree lane, a place we could disappear if necessary. Behind us, I heard a car door slam. They're following us, Charlotte whimpered. I picked up our pace, my mind racing. There was a shopping center about 6 blocks away. Lots of people, security cameras, if we could just make it there. Excuse me. The voice behind us was male. Authoritative. I didn't turn. Ma'am, please stop. I grabbed Charlotte's hand and we ran. She kept up, surprisingly well for such a small child, but I could hear footsteps gaining on us. We're not going to hurt you, they called. Right. That's what they all said. We made it perhaps 2 blocks before a second black car screeched to a halt at the intersection ahead of us. Then a third came from our left. We were surrounded. Men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles. Not the rough criminals I'd expected, but professionals. Expensive clothes, earpieces, a bearing that suggested military or law enforcement. I pulled Charlotte behind me, my heart hammering against my ribs. Stay back! I shouted, a desperate lie on my lips. I've called the police. One of the men, older, with kind eyes and graying hair, stepped forward, hands visible. Ma'am, my name is Agent Richards. We're not here to harm anyone. We're looking for Charlotte Wellington. Charlotte's grip on my hand tightened. Is that your last name, sweetheart? I whispered. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. But they might be lying. The bad men could be pretending. Agent Richards seemed to understand her fear. Charlotte, honey, do you remember the song your daddy used to sing to you when you couldn't sleep? The one about the mockingbird? Charlotte's eyes widened. How do you know that? Because your daddy told me. He's been looking for you for 6 days, sweetheart. He's very worried. Daddy's really looking for me? She asked, hope dawning in her eyes. He is. And he's right here. Richard spoke into his earpiece. Moments later, the most expensive car I'd ever seen glided to the curb. Not just expensive, but utterly extraordinary. A Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than I'd made in 5 years. The man who stepped out took my breath away. Tall, maybe 6 feet 3 inches, dark hair silvered at the temples, with a presence that commanded attention without effort. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything about him screamed power and wealth. But when he saw Charlotte, all of that fell away. Charlotte! Daddy! She broke away from me, launching herself into his arms. He caught her, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, his face buried in her hair as his shoulders shook with emotion. Thank God, he whispered, his voice thick with relief. Thank God you're safe. I stood there, watching this raw, beautiful reunion, suddenly acutely aware of my own appearance. My hair was unwashed. My clothes were the same ones I'd been wearing for 3 days. I probably smelled like the laundromat where we'd spent last night. After several minutes, the man, Charlotte's father, sat her down, but kept one hand on her shoulder as he looked at me. You're the woman who's been taking care of my daughter. It wasn't a question. His eyes were studying me intently, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see straight through to my soul. Yes, I managed. I found her during the storm. She was scared and alone. He stepped closer, and I instinctively took a step back. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming intensity of his presence. Agent Richards told me what his team observed, he said, his voice deep. You've been protecting her for 3 days. Feeding her, Keeping her safe. Staying with her. I nodded, unsure what else to say. What's your name? Gretchen. Gretchen Patterson. Gretchen Patterson, he repeated, as if committing it to memory. My name is Marcus Wellington. The name still didn't mean anything to me, but clearly it should have. Agent Richards and the other men watched our interaction with the kind of focused attention reserved for truly significant moments. Charlotte told me what you did for her, Marcus continued. How you spent your last money to buy her dry clothes and food. How you protected her from the people she was afraid of. I shrugged, deflecting. Any decent person would have done the same thing. Something shifted in his expression. No, Gretchen. Most people would have called the authorities immediately and gone on with their lives. You made yourself responsible for a stranger's child. Charlotte tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, Gretchen doesn't have a home. She's been sleeping outside with me. Marcus's attention sharpened. You're homeless? Heat flooded my cheeks. It's temporary. I'm getting back on my feet. Why? The question was direct, almost blunt. I wasn't sure how to answer without explaining my entire, humiliating story. Life circumstances, I said finally. Marcus studied me for another long moment. Then he spoke to Agent Richards. I want a full background check within 2 hours. Everything. Financial history, criminal record, medical records, employment history, family situation. Everything. Sir, that's not really necessary. Richard started. It's very necessary. Marcus's tone brooked no argument. This woman has been caring for my daughter for 3 days. I need to know who she is. A flash of indignation shot through me. I don't need your investigation. I'm not asking for anything from you. Maybe not, Marcus said, his gaze firm. But I'm asking something from you. What? I'd like you to come with us. Charlotte doesn't want to let you out of her sight. And frankly, neither do I. At least until I can properly thank you for what you've done. Charlotte immediately grabbed my hand. Please, Gretchen, don't leave me. Sweetheart, you're safe now. You're with your daddy. But I want you to come, too. Please. I looked between Charlotte's pleading face and her father's unreadable expression. I don't think that's appropriate. You have your daughter back. That's what matters. Get in the car, Gretchen. It wasn't a request. Marcus Wellington might have been grateful, but he was clearly a man accustomed to being obeyed. I'd rather not, I said, trying to stand my ground. I'm afraid I have to insist. Agent Richards stepped closer. Ma'am, Mr. Wellington just wants to ensure your safety. You've been exposed to a dangerous situation by helping Charlotte. Until we're certain the threat has been neutralized, you could be at risk. That possibility hadn't even occurred to me. If the kidnappers had been watching us, if they'd seen me with Charlotte, I might indeed be in danger. For how long? I asked. 24 hours, Marcus said. Give me 24 hours to debrief Charlotte, deal with the security situation, and figure out how to properly thank you. Then, if you want to leave, you're free to go. Charlotte was still holding my hand, looking up at me with those enormous brown eyes. Please, Gretchen. I'm scared without you. And that decided it. How could I say no? The interior of that Rolls-Royce was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Leather softer than most beds, climate control that felt like a gentle spring breeze. Enough space for Charlotte and me to sit comfortably while Marcus sat across from us. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere safe, Marcus replied, but he was looking at Charlotte, not me. Baby girl, I need you to tell me everything that happened, starting from the day you disappeared. Charlotte launched into her story, and as she talked, I began to understand the sheer scope of what had occurred. She'd been taken from her private school by 2 men claiming to be friends of her father. They'd held her in an abandoned warehouse for 2 days, waiting for Marcus to comply with some demand they'd made. What did they want from you? I asked Marcus, his jaw tightening. Access to certain government contracts. Information that could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to the right people. And you refused? I couldn't give them what they wanted, even if I'd wanted to. The information doesn't exist in the way they thought it did. So they just kept Charlotte, waiting for me to change my mind. What they hadn't counted on was Charlotte being resourceful enough to escape. I looked at the little girl with new respect. She'd not only escaped professional kidnappers, but had survived on the streets for nearly a week. How did you get away, sweetheart? They left me alone for a few minutes, Charlotte said. The rope wasn't tied very tight, and there was a loose board in the wall. I wiggled through and ran. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, and I could see the pain on his face as he imagined his daughter in that situation. The car turned through massive iron gates, and I got my first glimpse of the Wellington estate. Calling it a house would have been like calling the ocean a pond. The mansion sprawled across what had to be at least 20 acres, with manicured gardens, fountains, and outbuildings larger than most people's homes. The main residence looked like something from a European fairy tale: stone towers, graceful arches. This is where you live? I asked Charlotte, and she nodded, like it was perfectly normal. Want to see my room? It has a balcony that looks out over the stables. As we pulled up to the front entrance, staff members emerged to greet us. Not just a butler or housekeeper, but a small army of people whose job was apparently to take care of the Wellington family. Marcus helped Charlotte out of the car, then offered me his hand. I hesitated before taking it, acutely aware of the contrast between his manicured fingers and my own worn hands. Mrs. Patterson, he said as we walked toward the entrance. Before we go inside, I need you to understand something. What happened to Charlotte, what you did for her, it changes things. I don't know exactly how yet, but it does. I wasn't sure what he meant, but something in his tone made me think my 24 hours at the Wellington estate were going to be far more complicated than I'd anticipated. Honestly, I'd never imagined taking a shower could feel like a religious experience. The guest suite Marcus had assigned me was larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Damon. The bathroom alone was bigger than most bedrooms, with marble surfaces, gold fixtures, and a shower that had more buttons and settings than a spacecraft control panel. As hot water cascaded over me from what felt like a dozen different angles, I tried to process everything that had happened in the last 6 hours. After arriving, Marcus had disappeared into what I assumed was a series of important phone calls, while Charlotte gave me a tour of her wing of the house. Her bedroom was enormous, a canopy bed, a reading nook with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and French doors that opened onto a balcony overlooking the stables she'd mentioned. This is where I have tea parties when Daddy's home, she'd explained, showing me a small table set with delicate china cups. Would you like to have one with me later? I'd love that, sweetheart, I'd said. Charlotte's enthusiasm was infectious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong in this world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. I was a temporary guest, someone who'd help during a crisis, but would soon return to reality. The reality of the homeless shelter. And my 7 remaining dollars. A soft knock on the bathroom door interrupted my thoughts. Mrs. Patterson? It was a woman's voice, unfamiliar but kind. I'm Elizabeth, the house manager. I've left some clothes for you on the bed. They should fit reasonably well. Thank you? I called back, though I hadn't asked for clothes. When I emerged from the shower, I found an outfit laid out that probably cost more than I'd made in a month at my old job: a soft cashmere sweater, pale blue, well-tailored slacks, and undergarments that still had price tags attached. Even the shoes were there, comfortable flats, exactly my size. How did they know my measurements? The answer came as I was getting dressed. Through the suite's windows, I could see a team of people working in the gardens below. Not gardeners, but men in suits who moved with the same precision as Agent Richard's team. Marcus hadn't just brought me here for Charlotte's comfort. He really had been concerned about my safety, which suggested resources far beyond what I'd initially realized. A gentle knock on the main door. Come in, I called. Elizabeth entered with a warm smile. She was perhaps 50, with graying brown hair and the kind of efficient manner that suggested she'd been managing wealthy households for decades. How are you feeling, dear? She asked, looking me over approvingly. Much better, I imagine. The clothes are beautiful, but I can't accept them. I don't have any way to pay you back. Elizabeth's smile didn't waver. They're a gift from Mr. Wellington. He specifically requested that you have everything you might need during your stay. I'm only staying 24 hours. Of course, Elizabeth agreed, though something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Mr. Wellington would like to see you in his study when you're ready. Charlotte is having her dinner, then a bath. She's had quite an ordeal. The study was exactly what I would have expected from a man like Marcus Wellington. Dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and furniture that looked like it had been crafted by master artisans. Marcus himself sat behind a massive desk, still in his expensive suit, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked up when I entered, and something flickered in his expression. You look rested. I feel human again, I admitted. Thank you for the clothes, but I can't accept them. We'll discuss that later, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Please sit. We need to talk. I settled into the chair, which was more comfortable than it looked. About what? About you. Marcus leaned back, studying me with those intense eyes. I had my people run the background check I mentioned. I know about the divorce, the medical bills, your husband's betrayal. I know about your business, what you sacrificed, and how you ended up at the shelter. Heat flooded my cheeks. The idea of strangers investigating my personal life, learning about my failures and humiliations, made me feel exposed, vulnerable. You had no right. I had every right, Marcus interrupted smoothly. A stranger spent 3 days caring for my daughter in circumstances that could have been dangerous for both of them. I needed to know who you are. And what did you conclude? That you're exactly who you appeared to be. A woman who has been dealt a series of terrible hands, but who still chose to help a frightened child with the last money she had. I didn't know what to say to that. Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Gretchen, I want to make you an offer. What kind of offer? I need someone to help with Charlotte. Someone she trusts. Someone who understands what she's been through. He paused. I travel frequently for business, sometimes for weeks at a time. Charlotte has nannies and tutors, but what she doesn't have is someone who genuinely cares about her well-being. She has you when I'm here, yes, but I'm not here enough. There was pain in his voice. The guilt of a father who knew his work kept him away from his daughter. What happened this week has made me realize that Charlotte needs more stability in her life, more consistency. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm offering you a position as Charlotte's companion. Not a nanny, she's too old for that. But someone who would be responsible for her emotional well-being when I'm traveling. Someone who would live here, be part of her daily life. I stared at him. You want me to move in here? The position comes with a salary of $200,000 per year, plus complete benefits, housing, meals, and a generous expense account for anything Charlotte might need. $200,000. I tried to process that number. It was more money than I'd ever dreamed of making. Plus, Marcus continued, there would be a signing bonus of $50,000. To help you get back on your feet. This is insane, I said quietly. You don't know me. You don't know if I'm qualified to take care of a child. I know you spent 3 days protecting her when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I know you gave her your last $20 when you were homeless yourself. I know she feels safe with you in a way she hasn't with anyone since her mother died. Her mother died. Marcus's expression grew distant. Cancer. When Charlotte was 5. It's just been the two of us ever since, and I haven't done nearly as good a job as I should have. I understood then. This wasn't just about hiring help. This was about a father who knew he was failing his daughter and had found someone who could fill a void he couldn't fill himself. Why me? I asked. You could hire anyone. Someone with credentials, experience with wealthy families. Charlotte doesn't trust easily, Marcus said. She's been through too much, but she trusts you. That's worth more than any credentials. I thought about Charlotte's small hand in mine during the storm. The way she'd curled up against me in the gazebo. How she'd called me her guardian angel. I need time to think about this. Of course, Marcus nodded. Take all the time you need. But before I could respond, Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. I'd never seen her with such a look before, barely controlled anger. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation at the front gate. Marcus's jaw tightened. The same man as yesterday? No, sir. This time it's a younger man claiming to be Mrs. Patterson's son. He's with the older gentleman from yesterday, and they're both quite agitated. My heart sank. Robert. Of course, Damon would bring Robert. I don't have to see them, I said quickly. Actually, you do. Marcus's voice was calm but firm. If we don't deal with this now, they'll keep coming back. Better to handle it once and for all. 20 minutes later, I found myself facing both Damon and Robert at the front gate. My son looked uncomfortable but determined, while Damon appeared smugly confident, as if he'd brought reinforcements for a battle he was sure to win. Mom, Robert said the moment he saw me. Dad told me what happened yesterday. What you said to him. I told him the truth, I replied evenly. He made a mistake, Robert continued. People make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you abandon your family. The irony of those words coming from him, the son who had taken his father's side during the divorce without question, was almost laughable. Where were you when I needed my family, Robert? I asked quietly. When I was living in a shelter, where were you then? Robert had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't want to know. Damon stepped forward, clearly impatient with the emotional scene. Gretchen, let's cut through all this drama. I've spoken with a lawyer. Since our divorce isn't final yet, you're still legally my wife, which means you can't enter into any financial agreements without my consent. I stared at him in disbelief. What are you talking about? Our divorce was finalized months ago. Actually, it wasn't. Damon's smile was triumphant. There was a problem with the paperwork. A filing error. Technically, we're still married, which gives me certain rights regarding your decisions. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. That's not possible. Check with your lawyer if you want. But I'm telling you the truth. Damon's voice became wheedling, manipulative. Look, Gretchen, I'm trying to save our marriage here. This whole situation is just you acting out because you're hurt. I understand that, but it's time to come home. Home to what? I asked. The apartment you share with Sarah? Sarah's gone. Robert interjected. Dad's alone, Mom. He needs you. He needs my money, I corrected. Just like before. That's when Marcus stepped forward. I hadn't even heard him approach, but suddenly he was there, and his presence changed everything. Gentlemen, he said in a voice that could have frozen fire. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Damon looked him up and down dismissively. And you are? Marcus Wellington. And I believe you're trespassing on my property. We're here to get my wife, Damon said, puffing up his chest in a pathetic display of dominance. Your wife? Marcus's eyebrow rose slightly. That's interesting. Because according to the background check my legal team ran yesterday, your divorce from Mrs. Patterson was finalized 4 months ago. The color drained from Damon's face. There was an error. There was no error, Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. What there was apparently was an attempt to manipulate Mrs. Patterson with false information. Robert looked utterly confused. Dad, you said? Your father lied, Marcus said simply. Just as he's been lying about his reasons for wanting his ex-wife back. You don't know anything about our situation. Damon sputtered. Don't I? Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled. Let's see. Damon Patterson, age 68, recently divorced, lost approximately $80,000 to a fraudulent investment scheme promoted by his girlfriend Sarah Morrison. Currently 3 months behind on rent for his apartment, credit cards maxed out, bank accounts overdrawn. With each word, Damon seemed to shrink a little more. So, you see, Marcus continued, I know exactly what this is about. This isn't a man who wants his wife back. This is a man who needs someone to bail him out of his financial problems. Robert was staring at his father with growing horror. Dad, is this true? Damon's face was red with humiliation and rage. Gretchen, you can't seriously believe? I can believe it, I said quietly, a strange calm washing over me. Because it's exactly what you did during your cancer treatment. You used me then, just like you're trying to use me now. That's not. I was sick, Gretchen. I wasn't thinking clearly. And what's your excuse now? Damon had no answer for that. Marcus stepped closer, and I could see why Agent Richards and his team followed his orders without question. When Marcus Wellington wanted to be intimidating, he was terrifying. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. You're going to leave this property immediately. You're not going to contact Mrs. Patterson again. You're not going to harass her, threaten her, or attempt to manipulate her. If you do, you'll discover exactly how much influence a man with my resources can have over someone's life. You can't threaten me, Damon said, but his voice was shaking. I'm not threatening you. I'm making you a promise. Marcus paused, letting that sink in. Mrs. Patterson is under my protection now. That means she's untouchable. Do you understand? Whatever fight had been in him deflated completely. But Robert wasn't finished. Mom, please don't let this man turn you against your own family. I looked at my son. This man I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and felt a profound sadness settle over me. Robert, where were you when I was homeless? You didn't know? I stepped closer to him. You knew exactly where I was. Your father told you. You chose not to care. It's not fair, is it? I continued. When I called you after the divorce, what did you say? You said I should accept that your father had the right to be happy. You called me dramatic for objecting to his affair. You took his side without even hearing mine. Robert's face flushed. He's my father. And I'm your mother. But that didn't seem to matter when it was inconvenient for you. So that's it. Robert's voice was rising. You're choosing this stranger over your own family? I'm choosing myself, I said firmly. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing what's best for me instead of sacrificing everything for people who don't appreciate it. You'll regret this, Damon said bitterly. Both of you will regret this. Marcus's expression didn't change. Are you threatening my family, Mr. Patterson? The word family hit me like a lightning bolt. Marcus had just referred to me as family. Because if you are, Marcus continued, his voice dangerously low, I should mention that every word of this conversation is being recorded. Threatening the family of someone with government security clearance is a federal crime. That was the final blow. Damon and Robert left without another word, their heads down, their dignity in tatters as their rusted Honda disappeared down the drive, looking even more pathetic next to the Rolls-Royce and security vehicles. As they drove away, I stood there, feeling like I'd just witnessed the end of a chapter of my life. Are you all right? Marcus asked gently. I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure I was. Did you mean it? What you said about family? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Charlotte lost her mother when she was 5. I've been trying to be both parents to her, but I've failed in a lot of ways. She needs stability, love, someone who puts her first. He turned to look at me directly. But it's more than that, Gretchen. In the 3 days you spent protecting her, Charlotte smiled more than she had in months. She laughed. She felt safe. You gave her something I hadn't been able to give her. What's that? I asked softly. A mother's love. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I can't replace her real mother, I said. I'm not asking you to replace anyone. I'm asking you to be yourself. To be the woman who spent her last $20 on a frightened child. To be the person who made Charlotte feel safe when her whole world was falling apart. We stood there in the afternoon sunlight. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I allowed myself to imagine what it might be like to wake up every morning in that beautiful guest suite, to have tea parties with Charlotte in her garden, to be part of a family that actually wanted me. The job offer still stands, Marcus said quietly. $200,000 a year, plus benefits, plus the signing bonus. But more than that, Gretchen, you'd be giving Charlotte something she's never really had, a stable, loving presence in her daily life. I thought about the shelter, about my $7 remaining, about the loneliness that had become my constant companion. Then I thought about Charlotte's bright smile, her small hand in mine, the way she called me her guardian angel. Yes, I said, before I could change my mind. Yes, I'll take the job. Marcus's smile was radiant. Charlotte's going to be over the moon. But as we walked back toward the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would change more than just my living situation. It would change everything in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. 2 years later, I stood in the same garden where Charlotte and I had shared our first tea party, watching her chase butterflies among the roses. At 10 years old, she had grown taller and more confident, but she still insisted on our daily tea time together. The transformation in both our lives had been remarkable, but not in ways I could have predicted. Marcus had been true to his word about everything: the salary, the benefits, the signing bonus. It had all materialized exactly as promised. But more importantly, he had kept his word about treating me as family. "Gretchen," Charlotte called from across the garden. "Come see, the blue butterfly is back." I made my way over to where she was crouched beside the lavender bushes, watching a magnificent blue morpho butterfly rest on the purple flowers. "She only comes here when she knows it's safe," Charlotte said softly. "Just like you did." The observation was so unexpectedly wise that it took my breath away. In 2 years, Charlotte had grown from a traumatized little girl into a thoughtful, compassionate child who saw the world with remarkable clarity. "You know what, sweetheart?" I said, settling beside her on the garden bench. "I think you're right." Our morning routine had become sacred to both of us. Breakfast together, then garden time, followed by her lessons with her tutors while I managed the increasingly complex social calendar that came with being part of the Wellington household. Because that's what I had become. Not just Charlotte's companion, but an integral part of their family. The change had been gradual. First, Marcus had started asking my opinion about Charlotte's education, her activities, her emotional needs. Then, he began including me in decisions about the household, the staff, even some aspects of his business travel. "What do you think about the Singapore trip?" he'd ask over dinner. 2 weeks is a long time to be away from Charlotte. "She's doing much better with separation anxiety," I'd respond, "but maybe we could arrange video calls at specific times each day." Somewhere along the way, we had just become natural. 6 months after I'd moved in, Marcus had surprised me with a new title and a significant raise. Head of Family Operations, he'd called it, with a salary of $300,000 per year. "I don't understand," I'd said when he explained the new position. "I'm already doing everything I was hired to do." "You're doing far more than that," he'd replied. "You're managing staff schedules, coordinating Charlotte's activities, handling social obligations, and making this house feel like a home instead of just a residence. That's worth recognizing." But the real recognition had come in smaller moments. The first time Charlotte had called me Gretchen Mom in front of her friends. The night she'd had a nightmare, and had run to my room instead of her father's. The afternoon when Marcus had introduced me to a business associate as Charlotte's second mother, and the person who keeps this family functioning. Each moment had built upon the others until I'd realized something profound. I wasn't just employed by the Wellingtons. I belonged to them. And they belonged to me. "Time for lessons," I reminded Charlotte as we made our way back toward the house. "Do I have to? Can't we just play in the garden all day?" "Education is important, young lady. Besides, don't you have that writing competition next month?" Charlotte's face lit up. "Oh, right. I need to practice my jumping." As we entered through the French doors that led to the morning room, I nearly collided with Elizabeth, who was carrying a silver tray with what appeared to be legal documents. "Oh, Mrs. Patterson, perfect timing. These just arrived for you." My heart skipped. Legal documents were never good news. "What are they?" "I'm not sure, but the messenger said they were urgent." I took the envelope with trembling hands, my mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Had someone challenged Marcus's authority to employ me? Was there some legal issue with my background check? But as I read the documents, my confusion only deepened. What is it? Charlotte asked, sensing my distress. I'm not sure I understand this, I said, reading through the legal language again. That's when Marcus appeared, still wearing his suit from his morning meetings, but with a smile that suggested he knew exactly what I was holding. Ah, he said casually. Those arrived. Marcus, what is this? He sat down across from me, his expression becoming more serious. It's an adoption proposal. An adoption proposal? I repeated stupidly. For Charlotte to legally adopt you as her grandmother? The words didn't compute. I don't understand. Charlotte bounced in her chair. We want to make it official. You're already my Gretchen mom, but Daddy says we can make it legal so you'll really be part of our family forever. I stared at the papers, then at Marcus, then at Charlotte. This isn't how adoption works. Children don't adopt adults. Actually, they can, Marcus said gently. It's called adult adoption, and it's more common than you might think. Charlotte would become your legal granddaughter, and you would become her legal grandmother. It doesn't change anything about our daily lives, but it makes the relationships official. But why? Marcus leaned forward, his expression intensely serious. Because in 2 years, you've become the most important person in Charlotte's life. Because when I travel now, I don't worry about her because I know you're here. Because this house isn't the same without you. And Charlotte added, with the matter-of-fact tone only children can manage, because we love you and we want you to be stuck with us forever. Stuck with them? As if being part of this extraordinary family could ever be a burden. There's more, Marcus continued. He pulled out another set of documents. If you agree to the adoption, I'd also like to update my will to include you as Charlotte's guardian. Not just companion or caregiver, but her legal guardian if anything happens to me. The weight of what he was offering hit me like a physical blow. Legal guardianship meant that if something happened to Marcus, Charlotte would be mine to raise. It meant permanent security, permanent belonging, permanent family. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say yes, Charlotte exclaimed. Please, Gretchen. I want you to be my real grandma. I looked at this beautiful child who had already lost one mother, and had chosen me to fill that void. I thought about the scared little girl I'd found behind a dumpster 2 years ago, and the confident, loving child she'd become. Yes, I said, my voice breaking. Yes, absolutely. Charlotte launched herself into my arms with a squeal of delight that could probably be heard 3 counties away. There's one more thing, Marcus said as Charlotte finally settled down. A celebration is in order. I've planned a small party for this weekend. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and family. Family, I repeated, tasting the word. Family, he confirmed. The party that weekend was indeed small, but it felt enormous to me. Marcus had invited Agent Richards and his team, who had become something like extended family over the past 2 years. Elizabeth and the other staff members who had become dear friends. Charlotte's writing instructor, her favorite teacher, and 3 of her closest school friends. But the most meaningful moment came when we were gathered in the garden for the cake cutting. Charlotte stood on a chair to address our small group. Thank you all for coming to celebrate my new grandma, she announced with the confidence of a born public speaker. 2 years ago, Gretchen found me when I was lost and scared. But really, I think maybe I found her too. She needed a family as much as I did. As applause filled the garden, I felt tears streaming down my face. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Charlotte was asleep, I found myself in the study with Marcus, sharing a quiet drink and reflecting on the day. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found Charlotte that night? He asked. I considered the question. I'd probably still be at the shelter or worse. And Charlotte would still be traumatized, still afraid to trust anyone. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in our own thoughts. Marcus, I said finally. Why did you really do all this? The job, the adoption, the guardianship? Why? He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. Because in 42 years of marriage, no one ever loved you the way you deserve to be loved. Because you spent your entire life taking care of other people who took you for granted. Because when you had nothing, you still gave everything to protect my daughter. He looked directly at me then. Because Charlotte needs you, and I think maybe you need us too. I do need you, I admitted. Both of you. More than I ever imagined possible. 3 months after the adoption was finalized, I received an unexpected visitor. Elizabeth found me in the garden and announced that Robert was at the front gate asking to see me. My first instinct was to refuse. I hadn't spoken to my son since that awful confrontation 2 years ago. But something in Elizabeth's expression suggested this visit was different. He looks different, she said carefully. Humbler. I found Robert standing beside a modest sedan, dressed in simple clothes that were a far cry from the expensive suits he used to favor. He'd lost weight, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly when he saw me. "Robert." We stood looking at each other for several awkward moments before he spoke again. "I came to apologize. I know it's too little, too late, but I needed to say it." I waited, not making this easy for him. "I was wrong about everything," he continued. "About Dad, about the divorce, about how I treated you. I was selfish and cruel, and I've regretted it every day since." "What changed?" I asked. Robert looked down at his hands. "Dad came to me 6 months ago. He needed money, and I was the only family he had left. I gave him what I could, but it was never enough. He kept asking for more, making bigger and bigger demands. He looked up at me with eyes that held genuine remorse. I realized then that that's exactly what he'd done to you. Used you until there was nothing left, then discarded you when you couldn't give any more. I tried to tell you that," I said softly. "I know. I should have listened." Robert's voice broke slightly. "I should have protected you instead of abandoning you." I felt my anger beginning to soften, replaced by sadness for the relationship we'd lost. "Robert, I appreciate the apology. I really do. But I can't just forget what happened. I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see clearly now. What Dad did was unforgivable, and what I did was almost as bad." He reached into his car and pulled out a small wrapped package. "This was supposed to be your birthday present 3 years ago, the one I never gave you because I was angry about the divorce." I unwrapped it to find a small silver frame containing a photo from my 50th birthday party. Robert was perhaps 25 in the picture, his arm around me, both of us laughing at something his then-girlfriend had said. "I found it while cleaning out my apartment," he said. "I'm moving back to Denver, starting over, but I wanted you to have this in case you ever want to remember when things were good between us." Looking at that photo, I remembered the son who used to call me every Sunday, who brought me flowers on Mother's Day, who had once told his friends I was the strongest woman he knew. "I'm glad you're starting over," I said sincerely. "I hope you find happiness." "I hope I find peace," Robert replied. "I hope someday I can become the son you deserved." After he left, I stood in the garden for a long time, holding that photo and thinking about forgiveness, redemption, and second chances. That evening, Charlotte found me there. "You look sad, Gretchen Grandma," she said, using the new title she'd insisted on since the adoption. "Not sad, sweetheart, just thoughtful." "About what?" I showed her the photo. "About how sometimes people make terrible mistakes, but they can change if they really want to." Charlotte studied the picture seriously. "Is that your son? The one who was mean to you?" "Yes, but he apologized today. He said he was sorry for how he treated me." "Do you forgive him?" The question, asked with such innocent directness, made me think. "I think I'm learning to," I said finally. Charlotte nodded sagely. "Daddy says forgiveness doesn't mean you have to trust someone again. It just means you stop letting their bad choices hurt you." Out of the mouths of babes. As we walked back to the house together, Charlotte's small hand in mine, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. 2 years ago, I had been a broken woman with nothing left to lose. I had spent my last $20 on a frightened child and thought I was making the final gesture of a failed life. But that gesture had led to this: a family that cherished me, a home where I was valued, a future full of love and purpose. Sometimes guardian angels, I realized, come to save themselves as much as the people they protect. And sometimes the very act of giving everything away is what finally brings you everything you never knew you needed. Standing in the doorway of the mansion that was now truly my home, watching Charlotte skip ahead to tell her father about our garden conversation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete and perfect peace. I was Gretchen Wellington now, grandmother to the most wonderful child in the world, and member of a family that had shown me what unconditional love really meant. At 67 years old, my real life had finally begun. Now I'm genuinely curious: if you were in my shoes, having lost everything only to find a new family and purpose, how would you have handled Damon and Robert's return? Would you have found it in your heart to forgive them? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.